Okay, hello everyone. Hi, my name is Aidil. Before we start, maybe can everyone just move to the center and more to the front, so we can take better pictures with you all in the frame.
Do it for the cameras.
Yeah, do it for the cameras. Don't be shy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Yay. Yeah. My eyesight is bad, so if you come closer, I can see you.
Yes. That's even better reason.
And it's the truth. Thank you.
So we can start. Right. Okay. Welcome to the first masterclass, as you said just now, of MIFFest.
Hopefully not the last.
Hopefully not the last. Yeah. So we have with us Oscar winner Asif Kapadia from Great Britain. I'm sure you guys are familiar with his film, so that's why you are here. But I'll just make a short intro anyway. So awards-wise, he's won an Oscar with Amy. A lot of BAFTAs for Amy, Senna, and his debut, The Warrior. And box office-wise, that's something special because documentaries don't really make a lot of money in the box office. So he's got two money makers in Senna and Amy. I think is Amy still the biggest British documentary of all time? Is it?
In the UK box office, yeah. Yes. So Amy is number 1, and then Senna is number 2.
Ah,
not bad, isn't it?
Not bad.
Well, it doesn't include David Attenborough films and stuff. But in terms of documentaries, they're number 1 and 2.
So yes, you are in the presence of a box office hero as well. Okay, so let's start lah. Okay, so you are born in North London to an Indian Muslim family in the 1970s. So with that background, how did that shape you as a filmmaker?
Oh, it's a good question. So, my family were not into, they watched films. They watched Bollywood films. So I was the generation where nobody had DVDs didn't exist. So someone would come with a suitcase and a VHS player and some tapes for the weekend. And we would watch all of these Bollywood films over the weekend, and then they'd come and they'd take the suitcase and they'd go again. So that was the beginnings of watching kind of Indian movies in our house, and they used to show at the cinema, actually, in the UK. You could see them at the cinema. I'm the youngest of 5 children, and I think maybe that's the reason why I'm a film director, because by the time my parents got to number 5, they were like, just do whatever you want. We don't care. Just don't get in trouble with the police.
The older ones?
They're like normal people. Mm-hmm. So my oldest brother, he kind of teaches people to drive. My elder sister used to run a kind of organization to help disabled people, but she looks after her children. She had a disability, so she didn't work so much. My middle sister is like a therapist. My younger sister is a cranial therapist. So there's a lot of kind of helping people in the family. And then somehow I ended up becoming a film director. My dad was a postman. He was a lawyer in India. He studied as a lawyer. But when they came to the UK in the 60s, he had to start all over again. And so he became a postman. My mum was a machinist. She made clothes. Very kind of ordinary kind of working class family. But I kind of, because I'm the youngest of 5 children, quite strong kind of, my sisters were big influence and very well educated and well read, quite political. So in a way, I had that education of 3 sisters and my mum, very prominent. And then I was just knew I was going to do something different. I thought I wanted to be judged not on my exams. I was quite good at exams, but I just was always quite fighting against the system. So I decided not to sit exams again. And I said, I'm going to be judged on my work. I want to be judged on what I create, not on 1 hour of a year, on how my grades are. So I decided not to do A-levels, which is this thing that you do when you're 16 to 18. I thought, no, I'm going to do something else. So I studied graphic design. And then from graphic design, I studied media. And accidentally, I worked on a short film. Someone just asked me to help carry. I was the gopher. I was a runner. just carry the boxes. And in England, it rains all the time. So just in the rain, take the box from there and put it over there. And then take it from there and put it over there. And I don't know why, I thought it was the most exciting thing ever in my life. You see how boring my life was, right? And my parents didn't travel anywhere. We didn't go back to India when I was growing up. We never really traveled. So for me, filmmaking became the best way to travel and see the world. And here I am in Malaysia, you see?
Yeah.
Still works.
Yes. All right. So you were talking about Bollywood films. Any particular favorite in your family?
Oh, my mum, like Pakiza. Some might say my name is named after K. Asif, director of Mother India.
Okay.
So that there were lots of my mum was really into her movies. We watched a lot of Amitabh Bachchan films and films like that, Sholay and films like that were big. So yeah, there was a lot, that kind of peak era 70s of Bollywood cinema was like the best. So that's what we kind of grew up into. But I have to be honest, my attention span wasn't very good. My sisters watched a lot of television. People watched a lot of films. I just wanted to leave the house. I had to get away because we had a small house and 7 people living in it. And because I'm the youngest, I was just like desperately running away. So for me, filmmaking became like me running away with a circus. I was like, I'm going to go off and do some adventures. And that was the way to stay out of the house. To be honest, what I was mainly trying to do.
All right. So let's talk about The Warrior, your debut film. It was quite well decorated in the BAFTAs. I think it won 3 awards. My first film that I saw that you made, it was that one when it was first released. So I thought the trailers made it look like an action movie, but it wasn't. I thought it was a really gorgeously photographed movie. So, but visually, what inspired you to make that kind of?
So I have to give you a bit of the kind of backstory. So yeah, my first film starred this amazing actor, Irfan Khan, who this was his first film, my first film. Lots of the people who worked on it, it was their first feature film. The backstory is that I went to film school. I made lots of short films. I made a particular short film, my graduation film from film school, the Royal College of Art, called The Sheep Thief, which I filmed in the desert in Rajasthan, in India. And it had non-kind of professional actors. All of the actors were children. No one had acted before. One of the main actor was like a street kid, a pickpocket. He used to travel on trains and was a pickpocket. And we met him walking down the street and we cast him in this film. So this short film, which is about 25 minutes long, so it was a long short film, won a prize at Cannes. It won lots of prizes around the world. And because of this film, The Sheep Thief, I was able to get the chance to make my first film, The Warrior, which I wrote it because I live in London. It rains a lot, and for me, cinema is like escape. I wanted to escape, so I thought it was, I'm sitting at my desk. It's raining outside. It's cold. I'm like, exterior desert day. I want to be in a desert. I want to be somewhere really hot. So I wrote a script, which was a Western, like a Sergio Leone Western. And it was kind of crazy to do that as a first film. I had written a more sensible first film set in London, and I couldn't get the finance, and I was in development hell. I got the money to write a script, and I was going round and round in circles, and I felt every draft of the script got worse. And so my backup crazy idea was The Warrior. And the more crazy it was, in a way, it was so different to what everyone else was making, I managed to get the money to do it. And we went off to India. And in those days, because it's your first film, like I tried to do everything. I was a co-writer, I was a director. I went off, I found all the locations, I did the casting. I pretty much did everything because I didn't have children then. I wasn't married. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have to worry about anything. I could be quite obsessed. And I was about 25 when I started making it. And it came out when I was like, 27, 28. And yeah, it was kind of me as a Londoner, because I think of myself more as a Londoner than British, I have to say.
Okay.
Not something I feel particularly great about. So I'm a Londoner, I'm European, but my background is from India. So with these films, I wanted to kind of take those and put them together to make a film in India, not in English, with Indian actors, but with a European sensibility. And there were some French films that I'd seen that really inspired me. There's a film by Tran On Hung, French-Vietnamese director, Cyclo, which I saw when I was a student. That was a big inspiration of a a French director who studied at film school but is Vietnamese, and he understood the culture, but it was also very European. That was really my template, that kind of film. So that's where The Warrior came from. And I cast this actor who just looked amazing, who had the real soul, had these amazing eyes. And he was at the point of his career where he was thinking of quitting acting because he wasn't pretty. He didn't have the looks to be a Bollywood star. No one would cast him. But for me, he was like he walked in a room and I thought, this guy is like amazing. And the style of the script that I made had very little dialogue. One of my kind of things that consistently goes through my films is I don't really like long dialogue scenes. I like to tell the story with visuals. And so the actor was Irfan Khan, who went on to become this megastar. But yeah, the first film was our collaboration. And so that's kind of where The Warrior came from. And because it was different to everything else everyone was making in the UK, he ended up doing really well in the UK, won the BAFTA for Best British Film, even though it was not in English, which no one had done before. And then I had another sort of, the thing about making films is you have like something great happens and then you also have challenges. And it's really, film directing is about how do you deal with the challenges. So this big producer saw my film and said, I love it. It's the best film I've seen this year. And he bought it for the whole rest of the world. And his name was Harvey Weinstein.
Okay.
Okay. So I'd made my first film.
How long did he hold the movie before he released it?
So he saw the film just before it premiered, went to the financiers, said, I'm going to buy this film. I love it. I think it's going to win everything, win an Oscar, but he had a deal. I've got to tell you the story, right? So in the UK, my film came out and it did very well. For the rest of the world, Harvey Weinstein bought it. And he said, unless I sign a contract for my next 3 films, he won't release the film. And I said, well, I don't really do contracts. I don't really do that. I've never had a contract with anyone. Still haven't. I work for myself. I do what I want to do. If I like you, I work with you. If I don't like you, you don't have to work with me. I won't work with you. The only thing you've got is your kind of freedom to who you work with. So he said, well, if you don't sign a 3-picture deal, I won't release it. No one will ever know the film existed. So I said, well, that's not going to make me sign the picture deal. So I didn't. So he basically killed the film everywhere else.
Okay.
This is welcome to filmmaking.
Yes. Okay. So I think The Warrior was finally released in the US quite a bit later.
5 years later, I think Anthony Minghella kind of pushed, the director Anthony Minghella pushed him to release it. It got a bit of a release, yeah.
Yeah, so when I was researching what to ask for this masterclass, I read a review by Roger Ebert. And in that review, he made a curious throwaway remark. He said that it was written and directed by Asif Kapadia, a documentary maker for the BBC.
So, don't believe anything you read on the internet.
So that's why I was curious because I tried Googling.
That must be edited. That must have come after the film was made because I hadn't made one. I don't make documentaries for the BBC ever, and I hadn't made any documentaries yet. So they were. He was coming from. He may have died, and he may be writing from the future. I don't know. That's like time travel, Ebert.
So that's sorted then. Okay, so
but it's funny if they said that.
Yeah. It's in the review. You should just Google and read it.
There you go. Well, yes. He knew something I didn't even know.
Yes, because I was gonna ask if that was true, then why would you make a fiction film first? So that question.
No, do you know? No, I don't know where they've. Honestly, I don't. I mean, when I was a student. I mean, I've always, I just come from a background of you've got to always be working, always be doing something, right? You have to. No one's going to give me any money from somewhere, so I've got to work. So from when I was 16, I was always working for somebody, doing something. And when I was a student at film school, I used to direct commercials. Mm-hmm. So I could direct a commercial, get some money to pay the rent. And then when I finished film school, I would do a commercial that would give me the chance to pay my rent for 3 months, so I could write a draft of the script which became The Warrior. And there was a very short period where we have the kind of, I'm sure I don't know if you have, do you have a lottery here? Do you have like a lottery? Yeah, national lottery. There was this lottery that started in the UK, and a tiny little like 0.0000001% goes to good things. All the rest of it goes in someone's pocket, right? But tiny amount of money goes for good causes. And when I was a student, I did a few like documentaries of where the money goes for the good causes. And this used to be like primetime TV in the BBC. There you go, BBC, right? Primetime TV on the BBC. And there'd be like 25 million people would watch it. And I would make these little documentaries about a small cinema where got a bit of money, or, you know, the Tate Modern, for example. I did a film about Tate Modern. So I did make a few little things as a student, but nobody knows I directed them. I mean, I got sacked. I got fired as well because I hated working for the BBC. I didn't like the way they worked. I didn't like the editors. I didn't like any of that. But I did it because it was a bit of money. But honestly, even I haven't told anyone. So Roger Ebert's amazing, if you knew that.
Yes, somehow he knows. Okay, so that brings me to my
research is incredible.
So you made a few more fiction films after that. Far North, The Return. Yeah.
Far North with Michelle Yeoh.
Yes. Go Malaysia.
Michelle. She's here? No.
So
She's great.
So I think that everyone is also asking the same question. Why the pivot suddenly when you made Senna? Why the pivot?
So I've always I love cinema. I love world cinema. I love travel. But I also like sport, right? And when I was at film school, you weren't allowed to like both. You had to like respect cinema and smoke and sit in a bar a lot, but you weren't allowed to like football. And I was like, I like football and I like sport and I like cinema and I like music. I don't have to choose between them. So I always loved sport. And whenever I tried to do a film, anything sport related, most of the time I just thought in fiction films it was very hard to do. So there's a key thing that happens in life, okay? So I'd made a few feature films and there'd been kind of, in a way, art house hits. And honestly, the Harvey Weinstein story is quite important because the Warrior was selected for the Oscars from the UK. And then when all the issues happened with Harvey Weinstein, I was disqualified from the Oscars. The film was deleted because they said it wasn't made in a language. It had to be not in the English language film. It was in the category not in the English language. But then they said, but the film was made in a language not indigenous to the country that entered it or something, which meant, well, how can you make a film in English from the UK and be in a foreign language category?
Yeah.
So they disqualified us. So we got kicked out, okay? So there was like a real chance that film could have been successful and then it was cancelled. So then I got married and we had children. And the thing about the films that I made, in my mind, I wanted to be like Werner Herzog. I wanted to travel the world making these epic films. But then when we had a family, I was like, well, I also want to be around my wife and my children when they're babies. So that's the point when I get an offer to make Senna. So I thought, okay, this will be easy. I can just bang out a documentary. It'll be really easy. Documentaries are nothing like fiction films. And I can be there at breakfast time and I'll be there at bedtime and I'll just make this really easy documentary. Oh my God. Easy. 5 years later, I'm still going, this is crazy. I can't believe how hard it is because I got obsessed with this film and this character and this idea that I could make this film original and different in a visual way without any interviews, which everyone thought I was crazy because that's not how you make documentaries. You make a documentary by you interviewing someone, you see their face, you can tell if they're telling the truth or they're telling a lie, and then they just say, Ayrton Senna, he was great. He was so fast. And then you cut to a car going, meow. Yeah, that's a documentary, Asif, right? Just bloody do that. And I kept saying, no, I think there's a really cinematic way to do this. And so the edit went on for 3 years. And it went on and on and on. And I was very close to being fired. But I just thought, I know I'm onto something. And when things got very difficult, the thing we would do is I'd say, we should just show it. Let's just show it to people. And I learned something that I didn't do maybe enough when I was making fiction films. When I started making documentaries, no matter what stage of the film it's at, I screen it for people. Really rough. Just time code everywhere. And it's not, the footage is off YouTube. So it was a film for Universal Pictures and working title with like the biggest production company who made Notting Hill. And they make all of these kind of Hugh Grant movies. And it's the first time they made a documentary. And I was showing clips of YouTube edited together. And they all thought, this guy's crazy. He's gone mad, right? What is he doing? But by the end of the screening, everyone was crying. Everyone's like, this is like he's mad, but it works. I forgot to mention the first cut was 5 hours long, so it was a bit long. So we had a few issues, which is why it took so long to edit. But whenever we kept working on it, that somehow it just worked for an audience. We knew we had something. And so that's why I had to fight, because they kept saying, just put in interviews. And I kept saying, I'll do anything, but I refuse to put in interviews because it's got my name on it. I'll compromise in everything else, but not on this. And eventually we got there. And then the film came out, and the beginning, no festival will accept it. It didn't get in anyway. It got turned down by every festival. And so everyone thought this is like a huge failure. But somehow we got into Sundance, and at that time nobody watched Formula One in the US. There was no race in the US.
No.
Is it Roger Ebert or is it Harvey Weinstein? Who's that? Or is Formula One?
It's Formula One.
Are you there?
Okay.
Hello. Last time I did this, just so you know, I ran out of 4 mics. Do I talk too much? Is that what it is? I suppose my job is to talk, but what was the question?
Okay. So why did you choose that approach to just use archival footage?
So this comes back to all of my short films had very little dialogue.
Yeah.
The Warrior had very little dialogue. So for me, the films that I love, the directors that I love, like Hitchcock and people like that, they tell the story with pictures. They tell the story in the cut. So for me, the fact that I come from a fiction background and the fact that I come from a background of writing screenplays is why Senna is the way it is. Because my brain is thinking, how do I tell this story as a movie? Even though it's a documentary, I want it to play like a normal classical action movie with different kind of classical acts and the hero and the antagonist and kind of different kind of storylines. But also, I kind of want to tell the story from the point of view of the main character, okay? And not from a person now telling you what they think. And so if you know the story, I want you to forget the ending. If you don't know the story, I'm not going to ruin it for you. Because if I interview everybody else, you're going to be thinking, why haven't they interviewed Ayrton Senna? Where's Senna? Something happened to Senna. Did he not approve of the film? And you're thinking of everything but the story. So for me, the Senna, Amy, Maradona are all built on fiction storytelling rules. And the idea being the central character, you should be from their point of view. You should be with them. And by the end of the film, I want you to fall in love with the central character. And in this case, I want you to feel like you're Brazilian, right? You finish this film and you're rooting for Brazil, and I want you to hate France and Prost. And that's the idea. That's the challenge. With Maradona, I want you to become a Napoli fan. I want you to become a Diego Maradona fan. And anyone, including the English, I want you to not like them. You know, that's the intention, like you would do with a fiction film. Anything that takes you away from the central character, then I have to... And this came through a long process of editing. So, for example, in Senna, we only ever have a point of view shot in the car with Senna. You never go into Prost's car. So you always see Prost from the outside, objective, and it's always subjective with Senna. So all of this is subliminal, but it's kind of classical storytelling. Where do I put the camera? Even if you didn't shoot it with a documentary, I didn't shoot it, the intention is always what you're looking for. And so that was my kind of process of making that film, was to work on it like a screenplay. And I worked with a co-writer, and to reduce the story to like the bare essentials. So even if you have no interest in Formula One or sport, you should be able to tell red car, good, blue car, bad.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't matter what the wheels are. It doesn't matter who the engine is from. That's all like details, right? We never mention the wheels. We never mention tires. We don't mention Honda hardly. It's really just about character. Yeah. And it's all about character development. So my kind of knowledge of cinema comes, I went to film school, I studied film theory. So I always think, okay, what's the reference? So for example, with A Warrior, you know, I had references of Sergio Leone, or I had Kurosawa, or there were kind of classical kind of westerns that I was trying to do my version in India with. With Senna, my reference was like Scorsese. It's like Raging Bull. How many fights does Scorsese have in Raging Bull? 8, right? Each one is a world championship fight or a key fight in his career or in his life. So it's all about how it moves the story forward. It's not just the fight for the sake of it. So in Senna, there are pretty much 7 races. Mm-hmm. Each one is like a key race for the world championship, or one where he loses a world championship, when he becomes a champion, something goes wrong. And at the ending, the final weekend, again, Goodfellas is a good reference where you might go through a character's life and they start off as a teenager and you go right the way to their 30s. And then the final act of Goodfellas, time slows down. Senna is the same. You start with him doing go-karts as a kid. You fly through his life. He wins his first world championship at the end of Act 1. Act 2 is the rivalry between Senna and Prost. Act 3, time slows down and it's the final weekend. So that's like classical storytelling. And so if you kind of have written screenplays and understood and studied storytelling and filmmaking and screenplays, the idea is to apply that to non-fiction using archive. And so with Senna originally in the script, the idea that someone had, there were like 7 or 8 drivers because it was a peak period of Formula One. Lots of great drivers. There was Piquet, there was Mansell, there were all these other, and I was like, we can't do that. There's too many people. Bring it down to 2. It's got to be like a boxing match. So then we reduce it to Senna and Prost. And I think that's essentially kind of the rules that I would say is to understand how screenplay writing works, but then to use the material. Now, sometimes there's a really great story and it's a story beat that you want to make in a script, but there's no footage. So then that's when you have to remember, I'm a filmmaker, I'm telling stories, filmmaking is visual. So even if this classical thing that is in every biography, people talk about it, but it doesn't exist. But this other thing fulfills the same beat as a piece of storytelling, but it does exist, I'm going to use that instead. So there's always visuals that I could find that told you emotionally what the character's going through or the challenges they face, but you've got to figure out a way to show it. And so that's really the kind of idea that I kind of learned as I was going along with Senna, and then I continued with Amy and continued with Maradona, each of them with different challenges, What I'll say on Formula One exists because of sponsorship. And so what happened was, because of sponsorship, they have cameras everywhere. Without television, without cameras, there's no sport. So once you know that you're working in that medium, then your challenge becomes to see every camera angle from everywhere and to figure out how to get the footage. And once you get the footage, then you can try to work out the story. And there's a key thing that I should mention, right? As I said with The Warrior, it did really well in the UK. It won BAFTAs. It was critically did really well. But then I had the challenge of coming across Harvey Weinstein, who was a bully. I refused to work with him. He killed the film. I'm like, okay, I'll carry on. He's in prison now. I'm carrying on making films. When I made Senna, there was a different challenge, which was, if you imagine like the hierarchy, you have Universal Pictures, working title, who make all the kind of Hugh Grant, Richard Curtis comedies. You have the producers, you have the Formula One authorities, which is run by Bernie Ecclestone at the time. You have the Senna family, then you have the actual producers, then you had the writer, then you had me down there, right? All of these people had to work out their contracts before they came to me. So I was told we were greenlit. So we just had a baby. I was like, okay, this is going to be a good job. I'll get some money. I'll have a kid. It'll be fine. I'll be there for bath time. I'll be there at breakfast. None of this happened, right? So for 9 months, they were still all fighting over their contracts. So for 9 months, I'm making this. I'm working. I go to work every day for 9 months, but I'm not able to hire an editor. I'm not allowed to film anything, and I'm not getting paid because the contract's not been finalized. 9 months. So all I can do is go to work and look at YouTube clips. And so I spent 9 months looking at YouTube. I'm with an assistant editor ripping clips off YouTube and just joining them together and doing something. Now, at the time, you're thinking this is really frustrating because I can't actually start making the film. But in hindsight, that is making the film. Because for 9 months, all I did was study the character. For 9 months, I knew everything about Ayrton Senna. I didn't learn it by reading a book. I studied his face. I studied every bit of footage, every interview, in English, not in English, in Portuguese. And then I'd study Prost in French and in every language. And you go, okay, so essentially 9 months you're writing the script. Now I would do that on every film. Don't start making the film until you've done your research, but you do your research by looking at the material to understand the psychology of your character and what is the dramatic arc of your film. So in this case, that's when I didn't know how the film was going to begin, but I knew the middle was going to be this kind of rivalry Prost. I knew the ending was going to be this final weekend where we could tell it in stages, which was like a cursed weekend. And it's even the footage just of Ayrton Senna's final lap was so emotional that when I showed it to people, even if they didn't know the story, people would start crying. There's something inherently in that material that just emotionally affected people. So I knew we had a movie before we officially started the movie. And I think that's the thing of learning. The process of filmmaking is also about when it all goes wrong, how do you turn the thing when it goes wrong? How do you turn a challenge somehow into a positive? Rather than saying, I had a plan and I wanted to follow the plan and it went wrong and now it's all a disaster and I'm going to pull my hair out and or shout and argue. My whole thing is you've got to figure out how do you use that somehow. You might not know it at the time, but in hindsight, you realize that was the best thing that ever happened.
So,
in question 2,
yes. So another device that you often use that you don't use is talking heads, but the voiceovers, I'm curious to know, are they archival or are they newly recorded interviews, but then you use the archival visuals over them?
Yes, so a lot of the audio you hear is my interviews. So I do interviews. I used to do them on camera. I just didn't use the camera bit. But it's a mixture, and I don't really want you to be aware which ones I've shot and which ones I haven't shot. But as the films have progressed more and more, everything you hear is from my interviews. And so essentially my process is I'm doing the research, I'm looking on YouTube, and I'm interviewing people and I'm editing all at the same time. Because when I start editing, I'll see some footage and I go, okay, there's a really great shot of Amy Winehouse, but who's that person behind her? Because that person behind her is in this shot, this shot, this shot, and this shot. And I've never heard them speak before, and they're not well known. And in this one, they've got a camera. Let's go and find that person. And then I'd go and find that person, and interview them, and then they'd tell me their version of the story from their perspective. And they'd say, I was Amy Winehouse's friend. Everyone else was horrible. Everyone else, they're responsible for what happened to her. And that's what I learned with Amy, for example, is that everyone was her best friend. No one was to blame. Everyone else was always to blame. And that was the same thing that came around from everyone. And so that process of doing audio interviews differs. On Senna, I interviewed Alan Prost on camera, but I decided not to use it. Yeah, I just knew it wasn't. And there's a kind of long version that exists, which has talking heads, but it's not the finished film. With Amy, I didn't use a camera at all. I
use audio interviews.
Yeah, so with Amy, it was a different kind of process because Amy was like a young woman has died, and I wanted to understand how is it possible in the present day where a young woman that's famous, that's brilliant, can die in the public eye. So it was like investigating this situation. That's what it became. Now, it was with Senna. I started making a film maybe 12 or 14 years after he'd died. With Amy, we started making a film less than a year after she died. So it was still very raw. Even I thought it's probably too soon. Leave her alone. But then when I just started thinking about it, and I have to say, I spoke to my wife. She was like, you have to do it. She's amazing. And I'd never seen Amy. Even I grew up and I lived in North London. I lived in Camden for 10 years in that area. I didn't know her, but something about it, I wanted to make a film about London. I wanted to make a film about where I'm from. The good, which is like, it can be creatively amazing, but the bad of the tabloid culture and the way young women particularly are treated in the press. And it was like the darkest days of kind of Murdoch and the Mirror and the Sun, and really awful kind of culturally how they treated, a woman is treated so differently by the press, and how she was attacked and how she's on the front page. So I wanted to kind of understand this about the UK. And that's really what the film became, a sort of celebration of the creativity of a young Jewish girl who's into hip hop and jazz, who can be brilliant and funny and everything, but also how she could be kind of attacked so much.
Yeah, the media witch hunt.
Yeah. And the main thing was none of her friends trusted the media. None of her friends trusted the press. They didn't trust journalists. They said you were all to blame. So they assumed I was one of those people. They thought I was going to be a paparazzi. So the big thing on all filmmaking, but particularly documentaries, I think, is trust. You've got to be able to earn people's trust. They've got to trust you to give you their story, their personal story, and then later maybe they'll give you footage, etc. So with Amy, the worst thing would have been to have a camera. So in Amy, I finally got her friends to trust me to come into a studio where there was a microphone on the table. Because one of the things I don't do is I don't meet people for a coffee. I don't do small talk. I'm like, we'll meet, but we'll meet somewhere safe. But there will be a microphone. I will record it. And if you don't want me to use the recording, do not sign a release, and that's fine. But you have to tell me what happened, because if you don't tell me, I won't know. And if I don't know, I can't make the story to reveal the truth. So I ended up interviewing a lot of her friends. In Amy, if you've seen the film, at the beginning, all of her friends, they're very emotional, because the first time they tell you something is always going to be the most emotional one. So I would sit the opposite of this. We met in a studio, and I turned the lights off. And we would literally sit in the dark and talk. And we could talk for hours. Whatever they wanted to say, they could say. And sometimes they would say, I'll talk to you for half an hour. And 2 hours, 3 hours later, they're still talking, crying. And it became like therapy. And because the lights were off, they didn't feel self-conscious. They didn't feel like anyone was watching them. And they just had to tell somebody. And somebody needed to believe them. And the whole film became a series of young people wanting to kind of tell their story. And they wanted someone to listen, because when Amy was alive, they kept telling people she's going to die. Someone help her. And none of the grown-ups did anything, right? No one stopped it. So they didn't trust anyone. And so I was older than most of the people that I feature in the film. And it became almost like guilt or therapy for every single person. I interviewed about 120 people. And the film is constructed out of all of the research that we did. And then my job was to find a way to show it.
How about the ethical considerations? Because these are real people, and everyone knows the story. And from
you know the story now.
Yeah. So from what you've unearthed, so how do you balance the sensitivity for the family and also for what you want to tell as the truth?
It's a very good question. I mean, that is the challenge, and that is the difference between fiction and non-fiction. Fiction is like you can adapt a book or you can tell some story, but everyone knows they're actors pretending. Okay, when you do this, you're using the real footage and the real people and the real things people said. So in this case, for me, the go-to, like I said, I'm trying to tell the story in the present from the point of view of the characters. So my job was, how do I tell the story of Senna, who died 14 years before? How do I tell the story of Amy, who I've not met and I've not spoken to? How do I really know what she's saying? Because when I did the research, she was so funny and so witty and so brilliant until she got famous. And then she hardly spoke again. And the minute she got famous is when her addictions got really bad. So then I had a problem. I could see she hardly gives an interview. She hardly says anything. How are we going to understand her point of view? And then the answer with Amy was pretty straightforward. Now that you've seen the film, it's straightforward. Her lyrics. She's so honest. Her lyrics are like her diary. Everything is in the words. Everything she sings about is based on her own personal story. She wrote it. She based it on her own experiences, her relationships. So the spine of the film, to come back to like what we spoke about right at the beginning, my reference for Amy was Bollywood, right? It's like a Bollywood film because in India, the songs get released first. Then the movie comes out and everyone goes to see the movie to see the songs. So I did this is the same thing. Everyone knows the songs. Everyone's already heard it. You've danced to Amy's songs. You just didn't know what they were about. So that was my thing so the songs I know are a hit. People will go and see the movie for the songs, but what they will get is, oh my God, I had no idea what Rehab was about. I had no idea.
The words.
So then the song lyrics I decided to put on screen, exactly, so that I don't want you to get carried away with the beat and the music. Listen to what she's saying, because it's a cry for help. That album, Back to Black, is a cry for help, saying, even though she's saying, no, I don't want to go to rehab, what she's saying is, yes, someone make me go. If you care about me, you'd make me go. And I think that was like the revelation for me was once I did my research, I looked at the songs and I thought, one of the people I'm interviewing is this guy called Nick Shemansky, who was her first manager. And I got to know him and he really liked Senna. And he spoke to me and he came to me to say, no, I'm not going to be in a film. And then after we spoke, he started trusting me and he said, okay, I'll talk to you. Do you have any footage? No, I don't. I go, and then after he spoke to me, I do have a few tapes. I'm not going to give them to you. Can I see them? No. Okay, I'll show them to you. I'm like, then I look at him, this is amazing. Can we use it? He goes, no. And he goes, oh, okay. But I mean, I say that as a joke, but it's like no one knew who this guy was. And he discovered Amy. He was not famous. And so partly it's like, it's so painful for him to have been through that experience. He didn't make lots of money. He wasn't famous for being the person who discovered her. And the film was partly therapy for him, for the real Amy to be revealed, but also for him personally to say, yeah, I did all this work and I really tried to help, and I really had, and the footage doesn't lie. That personal footage from the first quarter of the film is all Nick's.
Yep.
And that all came from him sort of trusting me and talking to me and feeling that Amy became a tabloid character. But actually for him, she was like high art. She should be shown in like the highest of places. And in a way he felt, the way we were doing the research on a film, he thought finally someone's taking her seriously and the story seriously, and maybe she will end up being respected in a way she never was during her life. And so that's kind of how I built up trust with Nick. And then with Nick, he led me to Juliet and Lauren, who were her two best friends when she was young. And so, long-winded answer, having spoken to 120 people, I feel like I've done my research to know what the truth is and to show the truth via Amy's own words, via her lyrics in her songs, via everything she says in interviews and what everyone else said, because that's where archive comes in. I'm not making up what members of her family said. They said it on the record. I'm just cutting it very carefully to tell you the story in a condensed period of time. And then the key thing about all films, but particularly documentaries, you have to have a lot of lawyers to say, can you prove every single line in that film if it ever goes to court? To prove it, you need to have 3 people that will be willing to go to court to say, yeah, that happened. And every line and every scene in the film, we had people who were in the room who said, yeah, we will stand up to say that happened. So that's why the film can come out the way it did.
Right. So I've recently rewatched those 3 movies. So Diego Maradona and Senna, they're both sports icons. So you have a lot of footage to sift through. But I noticed in Amy, you use a lot of pictures instead of videos as well. So what's the challenge between having too much footage and too little footage?
I mean, it's always better to have too much. It's much easier to make a film when you have too much footage than too little. But the stills are important because the films are also about the period of time. None of the films, Senna, Amy, Maradona, none of the films are iPhone period. Because people film things very differently when you've got a phone. One, everything becomes vertical because of Instagram and everything, right? And also, everything would have been filmed like this.
Yeah.
Right? And the whole movie would be someone's head in the foreground. And back there is Amy. Yeah, it could be the Mona Lisa or something, and it'll be someone's head.
Yeah.
So, thank God.
Thank God it's not that period.
It's not that period where it becomes all about, and then if you don't like the way you look, delete, or even worse, put stupid ears on your head. What's all that about? So this was all a period when people had little mini DV cameras and they were filming. And Amy's really important for that reason. Like one of the rules of fiction film is essentially you don't look in the camera. You know, the classic thing of breaking the wall, right? With Amy, she's constantly looking in the camera. And I thought that was something that made it even more emotional and powerful because it's all about who's holding the camera. It starts off with her best friend at 14, Lauren, who's holding the camera, and she sings Happy Birthday straight to you, the audience, straight to Lauren, straight into the camera. Then it becomes her friend Nick Szymanski, the manager, and she performs for him and flirts with him. And then the camera becomes more she becomes on TV and she's talking to the camera lens. And then she becomes more successful. And then eventually it's her boyfriend, Blake, holding the camera, filming it in a way to kind of take advantage of her, I'd say. Later on, her father's got a camera. It's the paparazzi with a camera. At one point, the camera starts hitting her and attacking her, and it becomes quite violent with all the flashes. So the point of view is actually really important in that film, where we use the footage in a way to say we go from her having like a positive relationship with the lens to having a really negative relationship where she's then running away and hiding from it. So all of that is like your job as a director is to work out what are you trying to say visually. And with Senna, I didn't have any control. With this one, it was all about how I select the material, I guess, is what it is. Yeah. I can tell you about Maradona.
Yes. Okay.
That's a different one because he was alive. So I went to meet him. And he was in Dubai. By now I was getting a reputation of like making films about people who were dead. So I thought, I can make a film about live people. So I went.
So is that why you made it?
Well, part of the reason, I'm a football fan, right? When I was a student, so back when I was at film school, I read this book called Hand of God by Burns. I've forgotten his first name. It'll come to me in a second. And it's an amazing book about Diego Maradona in Naples. But I just remember reading it going, wouldn't it be incredible one day to make a film about Diego Maradona? And at that point, I'd only made fiction films. Even Roger Ebert didn't know I was going to make docs. But so that was in 97 or something like that. I would have read the book, 1997. And I didn't make Maradona until 2015. So it was a long time before. But I read this book and I just thought, what a story. No one's ever going to be a footballer like him. Then the mad thing is, he really liked the Senna film. So we basically have a meeting with him, and he's like, this guy made a film, Senna, and his next film is going to be about me. He put it on Facebook. So I then get to meet Diego Maradona. He's living in Dubai. I fly out there to meet him. It's all very exciting. My producer comes, a cameraman comes, a soundman comes. So with Amy, nobody came to the interviews. It was just me. Suddenly there's like 20 people that want to come. And we just sit there, and every day we book a studio, and we're ready. And like, is he on his way? He goes, oh, he's a bit late. Okay. Is he coming? It's like 2 hours late. Oh, he's coming. It's 4 hours late. He didn't come, right? Next day we book a studio. He doesn't come. Next day, he doesn't come. So we basically spent a week in Dubai, not cheap, hiring studios. My producers are drinking the budget in the bar. And it's like, we didn't meet him. It was a disaster. So I said, I'm going home. I'm like, forget it. I'll go home. I made 2 films when I never met the central characters. Let's just go home, forget it. And so on the way out, they said, no, he really wants to meet you. And then I ended up meeting him for 5 minutes. We shook hands. He said, you're going to make a great film. And then he went back upstairs to his room. So, okay. For 6 months, we just started editing in London. And then eventually his manager, his agent, got in touch and said, you are going to interview him, aren't you? And eventually we said, only if he wants to be interviewed, I'll go. And then, so the next time I went, I didn't bring a crew. It was just myself and a translator. And I recorded the sound myself. And then that process became very different because he was great. When he's good, he's great. When he's not good, he's really not good. But what was interesting was I'd done all this research and edited this film together, and everything that the footage showed, whenever he told me a story, it was the opposite of everything I'd seen. So then you got a problem. You go, well, previously I've made 2 films where I never met the central character, so I can kind of decide what the story is. Now I'm interviewing the guy, and everything he says is the opposite of all of my evidence. So who do I listen to? Do I listen to what the footage is telling me, or do I listen to the character? It's him telling me the story, and it's his life story. But he may not be the most reliable witness. So that was a problem. So I was like, how are we going to do this? How do I kind of make this film? And I'd done a lot of interviews. And then one of the people I interviewed was Fernando Signorini, who was his trainer, his personal trainer from Argentina. And Fernando basically said something in one of our audio interviews, which was this idea of he's like got this split personality. And that was like the light bulb moment. I thought, I get it. Because I like classical stories. I kept looking for who's the antagonist. Is it this person who was the manager of, Napoli? Or is it this person? Or is it this person? And then I realized, no, it's him. It's all him. He's like Diego, the kind of sweet young boy who wants to play football, who rises from nothing, becomes like this god. But he's Maradona, who's like this invented persona, who's got his ego, who everyone's to blame for everything that ever happened, and it's never him. So that became the twist. Senna had Prost. Amy had like family, boyfriend, paparazzi. Diego, it's all him. Like he could start a fight in a paper bag, right? He could be like anywhere and he would have an argument with somebody. And that's why he's like really amazing. And that's why it's so difficult to make a film about. But then once I figured that out, I was like, okay, now I know how to do this movie. It's basically an internal battle with himself, which in the end is the addictions come out of that. This idea, I've never done anything wrong, it's everybody else, but also there's some problem there that is not kind of resolved, which he then is easy to manipulate by people with kind of nefarious ideas. And the worst place to be at that point in the 80s was in Napoli, which was like the biggest kind of gangster place.
Mafia.
The Mafia, the Camorra, FIFA, UEFA, everything, Italian football, all at the same time. And he's like this incredible, his safety is on the pitch. The minute he comes off the pitch, his life is a mess. On the pitch, he was like in control. A bit like Amy. When she was singing jazz, she was in control. The minute she left, she wasn't in control. That's kind of the idea.
All right. So I guess now we open to the audience. If anyone wants to ask questions? Yes. Hold on. You will pass. Okay, I'll pass.
Hello, hi, I'm Emma. So I just wondering because you said that about the interview that he did not come to the interview again, and you guys spent like a week. What's make you not giving up? Because for me, I think if we are the new filmmaker or we are new persons, I think it's gonna make us like I think I
Diego
want to give up.
Maradona is very stubborn, but so am I. You know, so you have to kind of. It's all about psychology. You have to basically use psychology in a way. Always think about what does everybody want? What does everybody want? And in the end, you have people who are kind of narcissistic. In the end, they want you to want them. So then you have to say, I'm not interested. And you just have to be quite brave and say, I'll just make the film. Fine. Don't want to talk to me? Fine. Until they start phoning you again. Why are you not talking to him? How are you going to make a film without talking to him? And I had to kind of wait. But I'm lucky because this is the difference between making television or something low budget and making a feature film. I know that my films are going to take me a long time. So I'm always aware of how much time do I have. And also, there were contracts. There were reasons why people, how do I put it? You pay for people's image rights. But you can only pay for the image rights if you actually get what you've put in your contract, which is at some point you're going to have to talk to me. And if you don't speak to me, then how can we pay for your image rights? Because many people have tried to make a film about Diego Maradona, but they either had the footage or they had him, but they didn't have both. And we had access to the footage and we had him. So at some point I knew he had to talk to me or else there's no deal. Okay, so that was I knew that. But my thing was I'm not desperate. Never be desperate. Okay, you've just got to kind of figure out a backstory. Like, how can I do this? And I knew that I could do a lot of the story without him. And then once I know what the story is, I have to be very specific about what I ask him. And I saved up the difficult questions till later, because once I asked him some difficult questions, he never spoke to me again. So you have to be aware of nice questions. He's like, oh, this is great. I like talking. Let's do it again tomorrow. We did more tomorrow. Okay, this is great. Let's go and hang out. Okay, great. His team will go, no, don't hang out. No. And then I went away and I came back again and I did another set of interviews. But I knew I hadn't asked him about the Camorra. I hadn't asked him about his ex-wife. I hadn't asked him about the children he hadn't recognized. So I'm like, okay, that will be on the third one. And I did it on the third one. And just to explain, it was quite complicated, right? I'm in Dubai. I'm talking to Diego Maradona. He speaks very particular Diego Maradona style Argentinian Spanish. Nobody else speaks that language. I have a phone. I'm phoning someone in Buenos Aires and they're listening to Diego. And on another phone, they're phoning me with live translation and I have in my ear. So I ask a question in English, someone translates it into Spanish, he answers it in Diego Maradona Spanish, somebody listens on a phone in Buenos Aires, translates it, rings me on another phone in the ear, I know what he's saying. There's not bad, but it's like a 10-second gap. So I ask him a question at one point about the children he didn't recognize. And up to now, it's all going great and I'm like laughing and nodding. And he says something and I'm laughing and nodding. And then the translation comes through, which is, am I allowed to swear? I won't swear. Diego said, you have got a bleep nerve asking me that question to my face. Who the bleep do you think you are? And I'm nodding and smiling. I'm like, oh. And then the translation comes from like, uh-oh. And there's a very, very, very long pause. And then he says, but for that, I respect you. Because you had the nerve to say it to my face. Everybody else, they say it to my back and they stab me in the back, but you said it to my face. I was like, okay, great. So I ask him the question again, and he gives me a really long answer for like 15 minutes about Sepp Blatter. Yeah, I asked him a question about his son that he didn't recognize, and he gave me a 15-minute answer about Sepp Blatter. And I'm like, what? No, that's not. So I asked again, and eventually he gave me a couple of short answers about the Camorra, about the son he didn't recognize. He had many children he didn't recognize. He had about 7. I asked him the difficult ones. They never spoke to me again. I tried to show him the finished film. I went to Buenos Aires. I knew where he was staying. I was staying in a hotel next door. I never got to meet him. So once I asked the difficult questions, I had no contact with him ever again. But your job was to ask the questions. You have to make the film. You make the film is there. Even his family, his children, his wife, ex-wife, all of these people have all said it's the most honest film about him. But he never spoke to me again. He was meant to come to Cannes. He didn't come to the premiere.
Okay, next question. Anyone?
Hi. Thank you, Asif. Wonderful talk. My name is Imri Nasution. I'm a television director. So which do you prefer? Fiction or non-fiction? Obviously, you are enjoying the research. And as now mostly doing documentaries, do you feel that it is how difficult is it for you to get fundings to do documentaries? Because as we all know, I think the documentary market is quite,
Yeah. Thank you. Really good question. I mean, the way I kind of imagine it now is like, it's hard to say which is your favorite, but I would say I've had like many lives. I had a life I had a life working on other people's films for a long time. I was an assistant director, I was a focus puller, I was a camera operator, I was an editor. I worked on set for other people, and I really loved that. Then I had a kind of period of making a lot of short films. Then I had a period of making feature films as a writer, director. And then I'm kind of in this period of making documentaries. I still think of myself as a fiction director, but I mostly make documentaries. And part of the reason I do it is your brain has to work in a certain way when you're doing fiction. And it's very linear, I find. You have to have an idea, you write a script, you cast it, you get the money, you shoot it, you edit it, it comes out, you do press. My brain just doesn't work in that order anymore. Maybe it's just getting old and I've got dementia or something. But when I make a documentary, I'm like, I'll just start editing. And they go, what are you making a film about? I don't know. But I'm going to start editing, and then I'll figure out what I'm editing. And then I might shoot something, and then I'll edit it. And then I'll do some more interviews and I'll edit it. And I'll go, oh, now that's what the film's about. And so I like the process of making docs because I have a bit more control. They're smaller budgets. I have a smaller crew, but I have more creative control to go where my brain wants me to go. And I found when I was doing fiction films, sometimes the machine was so big behind me that when I went, I know we were going to do this, but I want to do that. They go, we can't do that because we've already put the trucks there. We parked the trucks there and they can't move the trucks. And I'm like, but move the truck. And they go, no, the trucks are there because it would be really hard to move the truck. So I would end up filming something that I was frustrated by. And that now, I just find life's too short. I'd rather make a lot of things more quickly or at the same time that I can do with documentaries. I end up making 2 or 3, don't tell anyone, 2 or 3 things at a time. Don't tell anyone. But I think they take so long to get together that now when I have a gap, or while I'm doing that 9-month period that we had on Senna, while I'm waiting for the contracts to happen on this project, I'll just go and make something else because I'd rather just be making things. So that's really kind of where I'm at. I would like to go back to doing fiction filmmaking, but it's, I'm the machinery I don't love, and I don't like being in development hell. So that's one of the things. There were some questions here, right here, 2 here.
Hi, thank you so much for being here, Director Kapadia. It's such a charming conversation. So when I imagine the process of making a doc, and if this is very wrong, it definitely has to do with my naivety because I've never made one before, but I kind of imagine it as kind of working with an ensemble cast because there's so many characters and so many intersecting storylines. But even with a clear theme in mind, I, as an aspiring writer, find it hard to decide what threads to follow and what voices to prioritize. So my question is, how do you navigate that complexity? How do you decide what storylines rise to the surface and which ones, even if compelling, don't make it to the final cut?
In a fiction or non-fiction?
Both will be helpful for me to learn.
Okay, so I would say the way to decide is, where's the drama? Like, there's a question right in front of you, so you could pass the mic forward. Yeah. So where's the drama? That's the simple answer, is what happens. If you're going to tell a story, there are kind of classical rules of storytelling. Something has to happen. And in a way, the films that I've made, have very dramatic endings, or something big happens. And I think the rule of thumb for me would be, when you're not sure, you're like, well, what is your A story? What is the main story? Where does a character begin? What happens along the way? Where do they end up? If they ended up exactly where they started or nothing happens, that's probably not a great story. But if something massive and dramatic happens to them, which changes them or changes the story or moves it off in a new direction, that's a good bit of story. And so when in doubt and you've got too many ideas, it's like, what's the big story that you're going to tell? And then you can have subplots, or you can have characters that are like secondary that bring something to it. But I think that you're always looking for like drama. You're looking for conflict. You're looking for some action. You're looking for key things that happen. If you don't have that, then it's just like a mood, or it's like a space or a location. You know, that's what I would say. That's my taste. Your taste will be different. The other thing I would say is whatever you make a film about, even I've done fiction and non-fiction, even if the documentaries are about other people, for me, they're still personal. I'm still telling a story about something that I think is important. So with Amy, it's like, I thought she was a great artist, and I think people should have looked after her better. I thought the industry should have looked after her. Her family could have looked after her. I thought she needed better people around her. And the people who really cared about her were pushed away. So for me, that's like my feeling, is that's what I want to get across. With Maradona, maybe there's this idea that, you know, he was like a child. He had no education. He comes from a really, really poor background. Suddenly becomes a god. If you give someone like that everything and never say no, he's probably going to fall at some point. And the minute it falls, they all leave him. You know, so that's like Shakespearean, that kind of journey. So I'm always kind of thinking like, what is the big story? What is the kind of, you know, the films are, every story is based on some historic story in a way. You could kind of apply a Greek tragedy or a Shakespearean story or whatever kind of historic stories from India or from Asia that you can have. So I'm always looking for that. I'm looking for kind of like character development. For me, docs that I find sometimes not as interesting are the ones where 10 minutes in, I'm like, I know exactly what this film's about. I know exactly where it's going to go. And for 2.5 hours, it's just going to keep doing that. And I think for me, that's not great storytelling. So that's what I would look for, is like, find conflict, drama, action, and you shouldn't end up where you thought you were going to be 10 minutes in.
Oh, hi, my name is Lim. So I think that I have two questions, focusing on processes, and thank you for sharing all your processes. I suppose the first question is, you know, like right now, I have amazing clarity about your process, and you know, it sounds like you're amazingly clear about what you like, what you want to do, and what you want to.
I am now,
create.
not when I'm making a film.
Exactly. So I want to ask you, like, you know, probably a spin-off from what she's asking. You know, at that point where you know you didn't know you had to wait for 9 months. In documentary, there's a lot of variables. So at that point of time, how did you continue on, especially when you know somebody bought the rights to your movie?
Yeah.
Etc. Etc.
It's a really, really good question. I think it's something we haven't talked about, which I think is very important. Like, in the end, if you're a storyteller, whatever your job, whatever you might do, you could be a producer, a writer, an actor, somewhere or another in you is your gut, like your thing inside, your inner voice. And I think the really important thing is to learn to trust it. Whatever stage you're at, wherever you're at, what is your gut feeling? What is your inner voice telling you? So why do I do this film and not this film? Why do I make that decision? Why this bottle of water and not this bottle of water? And you go, well, I don't know. That feels right. Okay? And it's just like learning to trust your instinct. And that, for me, has been a big part of learning to become a filmmaker and directing, is at some point you've got to stick with your gut. And you've got to make decisions that you feel. Now, you may be wrong, but at least it was your wrong and not someone else's wrong. And I think that's the challenge. And sometimes you will say this, and there's 100 people on the set saying, no, it should be that. Well, that's why you're the director. Because, you know, success has many fathers and failure is an orphan, right? So if it works, everyone will go, yeah, we always thought it was a great idea. We said to Asif he should do that. And if it doesn't work, it's like, he's an idiot. He didn't listen, you know. But that's filmmaking. That's life. You just have to learn to trust your gut. And in a way, I learned that when I was at film school. There was a particular thing that happened when I was making a student film, The Sheep Thief, my graduate film, where I made a decision because I'd cast somebody in this film. It was a quite naturalistic, but it was a fiction film. And I cast somebody, and they were all non-actors. And I just could not get a performance from this actress, this woman who was a villager. She was not an actress, she was a villager. And no matter what I did, I couldn't get anything. It wasn't working. Because I wasn't happy, the crew were not happy. And it also very easily became this thing where everyone thinks what you're making is rubbish. It's a waste of time. They don't want to be here. They're all not feeling well. They want to go home. They're complaining. They don't want to come to set. They turn up late. And while I was on one particular shoot on a big crowd scene, somebody else in the background action, my assistant director said, have you noticed that woman in the background? Just watch her on the next take. She's really interesting. And even though she was in the background, she was doing something brilliant. And then I looked at her, I thought, okay, I'm going to have to make a tough decision here. I stopped filming. I called all the crew over. I said, look, we've got a problem. I made a mistake casting this person. I'm going to change the lead actress. In the middle of a shoot, I'm going to recast. And half the crew walked. And they're like, you don't know what you're doing. You're an idiot. We quit. The other half stayed. This is the lesson we have learned. The half that quit, pretty much none of them are in the film industry. It wasn't for them. The other half are still in the film industry because that's filmmaking. Sometimes shit happens and you have to change your mind because you made a mistake. And the question is, who's going to go with it and who's going to blame someone for it? And so they all quit. And that was like a gut feeling. Now, it may be that the actress was no different, but I felt better. I felt more confident. If I'm more confident, I do a better job. If I'm doing a better job, the rest of the crew say, he looks like he knows what he's doing. He's happier. We're happier. And that short film was like a real turning point in my life because that film then won a prize at Cannes. That film won all these awards around the world. That film gets me a chance, gets me an agent, gets me, some money to make my first feature, gets me a chance to make The Warrior. And I could almost bring it down to that one moment where actually, once we had only half the crew, it was far more fun making the film than having all of these people hanging around moaning. A lot of film crews moan. Get rid of them. Get rid of them if they moan. If they're not there with good energy, good karma, get rid of them because they bring you down. So that was like an example of just learning quite early on to do something and stick with it. And then you're on your way. One of the crew that stayed is my wife, and we've got 2 kids now. And that actress, that woman, this is crazy, right? The woman that was in the background who we cast said, you two are going to have children together. We were not together at the time. She was with someone else. So this woman was like, not only changed my life, she changed my life. So she was like, you two, there's something going to happen. You're going to have children. And it's mad. It was like 2 years later we got together or whatever. So there you go. She was amazing. Kokila Ben. So that is an example. Senna, there's a different example, like not having talking heads. Amy, the idea of how are we going to do this? Okay, let's not interview anyone. Let's do it. Let's put a lyrics on the screen, which everyone said, that's really stupid. Who wants to read when they're watching a movie? Every film will have something that is your gut feeling. And you don't have to have lots of decisions on a film, but every now and again you have a big one to make. And I think that's what you have to do. Whether you're a writer, an actress, or whatever you might be, a producer, at some point, know when to trust your gut.
I actually have a second question.
Let's just see if there's anyone else.
Yeah.
Sorry, we've got to move on. Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Kapadia. Thank you so much for all the insights and goodness that you have shared. I'm Vash Jackson. I've come from India, and I wanted to see you in person. And it was an amazing session today. My question today is, what would you tell your younger self who's about to get into filmmaking?
My younger self or my older self? Younger self. I don't know if I would. I don't know if I would change anything. I would just be like, because the reason I got into filmmaking was not because anyone pushed me. It was just because, like I said, I was running away from the family. I was running away from where I grew up. I wanted to kind of travel. I wanted to join the circus. And the thing that's great about filmmaking is like, there's no 2 days that are the same. It's not a real job. It's not a proper job. I've never had a proper job. I had one job once. After university, I got a job working in television. It's the only time I had a proper job. I was so bored. I quit. And it was the first time I had money. I had a company car, I had expenses, but we were making rubbish. It was like such bad. And all of my friends were like really happy and they did really well and they made loads of money. And I was like, I can't do it. My heart doesn't let me stay in a job where I feel like I'm not doing anything worthwhile. And I also felt like it was easy to make fun of people on television. They were doing things that were kind of just rude. And I just quit because my inside was saying, this is you can do better than this. So I left. And so my main thing would be is that if you're not happy somewhere as well, get out. Change it. You know, if anything ever keeps you awake at night, there's a problem you have to deal with. And so I sleep quite well now. And I think that, I would just say like, do whatever you want. Be happy and don't be bored in life. So when you're young, the challenge is you might do something and you might be, I studied graphic design. I did lots of things which I was terrible at. And I thought, well, it's not for me. I'll find something that I really enjoy. And I think that was the thing. I got lucky. I found filmmaking. I really enjoyed it. And I still haven't mastered it. I'm still a student. You know, I'm still learning, but that's quite good. You know, it's good to not have stopped learning. Always keep learning. And I think the reason why I really like documentaries is that I feel like every film that I do is about 3 years of my life. So it's like doing a PhD in a subject. Whatever the subject, pick a subject that you're really obsessed with and interested in, and don't expect to know the answers at the beginning, but during it, you learn. So you're the audience. You don't know anything at the start, and then by the ending, you know a lot. And I think that's one other note, really important note. One is trusting your gut instinct. The other one is never be afraid to say, I don't know. So when you're on set and someone asks you a question, like first day of The Warrior, we're shooting in Rajasthan, Irfan's there, everyone's there, we've got horses, we've got this big set, 250 people on the crew. I'm the youngest person pretty much on the crew, and I'm the only one doing the first film. First question as I walk on set, so which lens do you want? I was like, honestly, I couldn't remember the last time I filmed anything. So I was like, I don't know anything. I've forgotten how to direct. It was like a test. The camera assistant asked me a test. What lens do you want? I don't know. And what I should have said was, I don't know. What do you think? You know, and the answer was 35 mil. And then you put on a 35 mil and you go, that's wrong. Let's go one wider. And the interesting thing is not being afraid to say, I don't know. So now when someone asks me a question, it doesn't matter if it's like an executive from Netflix or Apple or your studio, your producers or whoever it might be. When they go, how are you going to do this? And you go, honestly, I don't know yet. I'll let you know when I know. What do you think? And they go, I don't know. And that's the thing. Don't be afraid to say that. So that's why I would say to my younger self is don't be afraid to say, I don't know. You know, that's why you're here. So if you're the camera crew, you put a lens on, I'll tell you if I like it or not. So my thing is directing is often reacting to what someone else has done. Somebody does something, show it to you, you go, no, that doesn't feel right. Maybe try this. Rather than you telling them what to do. That's what I would say.
Hi, hello. I first of all, thank you for the wonderful masterclass. I'm Celeste, and this is Kian. We are currently working with Sir Zaral Al-Bakri on a film that he got a prize grant from FINAS actually, and he can't be here today, but he really wanted to attend, and he's really keen on us mentioning that your documentaries were a really big inspiration for what he wants to do. You've wonderfully answered any of the questions that I was already thinking of. So I have a very specific question. I watched Amy a few days ago. And one thing that I thought was an interesting choice was the use of drone footage to posit the story within Camden or like the different parts of the UK. I personally found that they were a little bit distracting because it felt like I could tell that the shot wasn't like it would say like, oh, we're in this location, 2001. But then it would be this like really clean and stable like drone shot of like roads and houses. So I just wanted to understand like what was your creative direction with that?
Great question. You know, no one's ever asked me this before. So believe it or not, Amy is one of the first films ever to use a drone. Literally, if you look at when that film came out, no one had done it before. And some of it's not drones. I shot another film before I made Amy. I did a film for the London Olympics in 2012 called The Odyssey, which was about East London, where I grew up and where the Olympic Games were going to take place. And I was commissioned to make a short film. So I kept saying, I don't have time, I don't want to do it. And I said, no, you have to do it, you have to do it. And it was like a crazy big budget because it was Olympics, right? They were just wasting money. So they gave money to like 6 or 7 directors. So Mike Lee did one, Lynn Ramsey did one, I ended up doing one. So I was like, what can I do? I don't know. I've got a lot of money to blow. I said, okay, I'll make a film about London and I'm going to shoot the whole thing from a helicopter and it'll be about how London is going to change. So I shot the whole film. In the old days, if you wanted an aerial shot, you got in a helicopter and you got an amazing camera operator and you put a camera on the bottom and then you filmed. So a lot of that footage is not actually drones. It's shot with a helicopter over London and it has like one of the best camera operators. Sports camera people are like the best. So this guy does every big action movie and he ended up working on our film. And so what I do often, don't tell anyone, is I steal footage from my old films and I put it in my next film. And I don't tell anyone. Wait, don't tell anyone. So that footage of Camden is not actually a drone. It is from a helicopter. There is some drone footage in it, which I just happened to be editing in a particular facility that had an animation. It was run by an animation company. And we were having lunch one day, and there was this noise coming from saying, I was like, what the hell is going on? We went outside, and this guy had this machine that was like flying around. I'm like, what the hell is that? It's a drone. And he was practicing using this drone. And I said, what are you up to? He goes, oh, we're going to try it out this weekend. So I literally scribbled on a piece of paper 4 addresses. I said, if you're in London, why don't you go here, 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 and here? And I gave him a street in Finchley, where Amy grew up. There's a shot in Finchley. Her house in Camden, there's a shot that flies under some trees, which I think is a pretty great shot. So this is all his animation director. I wasn't even there. I just gave him a list of addresses. Primrose Hill, that's where she meets Blake. There's a shot in Primrose Hill. So, but at the time, now every bloody doc has drone footage. I would never put a drone in a film ever now. Everyone does it. At that point, no one had done it. And it's helicopter footage. So, good question. But it was like, there was no way we would get any of those shots. And because it's a doc, I was using entirely archive. It's a funny thing to kind of have footage. That's probably the only footage that was shot for me, is some of the drone footage. Everything else is from some other source.
Okay, maybe one last question. Yeah.
Take this lady.
Yeah.
We'll squeeze.
Hello, I have a question specifically about Formula One. So currently, the landscape of Formula One is super corporate and super commercial. And
Always has been.
Yeah, and there are a lot of products in F1, like Drive to Survive and the recent movie. And these are mostly vehicles for brand placement and for a very corporate narrative. So I guess my question is, as a filmmaker and a fan of Formula One, if you were to make a movie about contemporary drivers, say Sir Lewis Hamilton, how would you approach the narrative of truth? Is that even possible in the current narrative and commercialization of sport? Thank you.
The funny thing is, none of those things that you mentioned would exist without Senna. Literally, Senna was like the one that suddenly made everyone in the US realize that this was an interesting sport. But I think, honestly, Formula One has always been about sponsorship. That's all it is. It's about countries selling themselves and about fuel companies and engine companies and car companies and technology. And that's what it is. Literally, cameras were invented in order to make them small, to put them on a car so you could see the logo wherever they are, and they're covered in logos. And so that's corporate. It's always been a corporate sport. It is entirely corporate. The challenge is making something emotional when it's a blatant corporate activity. And so that was the thing, was to not make it about the sponsorship. Although, his helmet is Senna's helmet. It's got a logo on it. He's sponsored by banks. That was always there. Nowadays, I think it's just drama. We come back to the same thing I said earlier. Anything that you do, you can ignore all of the machinery if you've got a good story and if you've got drama and you've got development and conflict. Something needs to happen, and there needs to be some tension, and there needs to be a change. And if there's just like everything's going and it's the same in the middle, beginning, and the end, then there's not a story, I would say. We should get one last one. There was a question there. Go on.
One last question.
Then, there you are.
Hi, Asif. Thank you for being here. My name is Diban. And my question is, you were saying that you started off with fiction with Warrior. And then when you moved to documentary filmmaking, understanding screenplay writing and understanding fiction dictates you how to approach a new way on making these documentaries. Then after making a couple of documentaries, when coming back to fiction, like I see you have made 2 episodes of Mindhunter. So coming back to fiction, how does documentary filmmaking change your approach on making fiction? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. So I did, for David Finch, I did some of Mindhunter, this like amazing series. How does it change? I think all of it is storytelling, all of it is directing, all of it is, what is this scene about? What am I trying to say? What is the best way of saying it? What is the best way of showing it? What is the best place to put the camera? What is the best angle to use if it's archive? I think in my brain, it's all like directing is directing. Whether I do commercial, whether I do a short film, a fiction, a series, it's always like, do I feel anything? Does anything happen? You know, with Mindhunter, when I first arrived, the screenplays had been written and I did a reading with the cast. And there was like this big sequence of nearly 15 minutes of introducing a character. And, you know, I came on board, I was a hired director, and I'm in a reading room with the actors rehearsing it. And eventually, a bit like when I said earlier, when you don't know something, rather than pretending, just go, and I had to go, what is this all about? You know, why have we got 15 minutes of people just making a mistake? And it was like a really bad joke at the end of it. And when I said it, I was a director, but they'd already been shooting for a long time. When I said it, everyone said, oh, thank God, someone's finally said it. We don't know why this has been written like this either. So then we went away and said, so maybe we should rewrite it. And it was one of those things where you just go, I don't get it. I don't understand. What are we trying to say here? Why is it taking so long for somebody that's literally just leading up to a bad joke? And to do that 15 minutes, there were like 15 different locations. There was a lot of screen time spent on one idea that wasn't particularly great. So we just went away and rewrote it. And I think a lot of it is that, whether it's fiction or documentary, you might have a sequence that looks really great in a fiction film or in a documentary. You go, yeah, but what is it saying? How does it move the story on? What is the point we're trying to make? And if the point you're trying to make is really minor, don't spend 20 minutes on it. You know, you could do that in a cut. You could do that in a couple of shots. And so that's all just like trying to understand the material. What is the big story? What is the character story? What is the kind of beat of that one scene? How does it move the story forward? And I think that is, once you kind of start studying stories, whether it's fiction, non-fiction, books, screenplays, novels, you just get it into your head. Instinctively, that's what I think you're always looking for. And once you understand what you're trying to say, then you can find the best way to do it, the best way to show it. Or it could be a voiceover, or it could be a shot, or it could be a piece of text. Because one of the things I do in the docs is I have the footage, I have the voices that I might interview, you have obviously editing, you have music, but I use a lot of graphics on my docs. Like Senna's got a lot of text, Amy's got a lot of graphics, so they're really complicated visually, but they tell you another layer of story that you don't necessarily read as it being told to you by like a voice. But there's a lot of text that gives you more information. So it's a lot of these layers that basically can tell you, the audience, something without you realizing you're being told something. That's the thing. It shouldn't feel self-conscious. That's what I think is bad directing. When you're aware of the information being given to you in a particular way, then I think that's, particularly for me, I think that's bad directing.
Okay. So I guess that's all the time we have for now. So yes.
Part 2 tomorrow.
Yes. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Mr. Asif.
How many questions did you get through? 4.
Yeah, 4 or 5. But great answers. So thank you again for enlightening us with your experience. Thank you again, everyone, for coming.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Yes. So hope to see you next.
Good luck.
Thank you all
There was
for
something about a picture that I want.
Yeah, yes.
thank you all for joining the stimulating conversations with Asif Kapadia. And shall we take a photo together in memory of the inspirations we got tonight? So gather in the center, I think.